Hello and welcome to Binge of the Week. I'm Sonia, aka Binge of the Week. Today's episode is The Librarians and some dude named Jenkins. So, last week I left off, silly me, thinking, I don't know if I'm gonna go from watching the Librarian movies to watching the Librarians series. And I don't know what would possess me to think I would do anything else. I am someone who really likes to stay in a universe when I'm enjoying it. And I was enjoying it, so of course I went directly into watching this show. It's definitely an interesting transition, I think, from the movies to the show. Obviously, the biggest factor being, well, just production itself. I mean, they're different mediums. But the biggest difference in the storytelling is that we go from having the Librarian singular movies being a singular main character of Flynn to a more ensemble cast of the Librarians, plural. And that does a bunch of things to the story, which, again, I think is also partly down to the medium of telling a story in a movie versus telling a story over the length of a season on a show. The movies, like I said in the last episode, were fascinating to me because they live in this comfort kind of space where there's just all this implied goodness and there's no discord needed in the library team and structure and the good guys because we're just on one quest every time. There's some conflict that comes from the romance, and there's conflict that comes from resolving the quest, but there's never conflict really in the team, even though it does build towards the third movie where Flynn being this solo act and having to have this solitary life starts to weigh on him, and it becomes the driver of the third plot of the movie of him being alone and not wanting to be alone, where I think in the opening scenes of the movie, Judson tries to tell him to be celibate, and he freaks out about it and asks Cal to end his life. But the loneliness aspect of the third movie really becomes such a central point to the entire show and such a driver of conflict. And his adoption of that life, of this monastic kind of, I'm this role in my life, I'm the librarian, that's what I am, beginning, middle, end, there's nothing outside of that. And it becomes a driver of the conflict because this show is about a team of librarians working together. So that's really interesting. And the show does rely on more, I want to call it manufactured. I'm not saying it's bad, but there's like manufactured discord that happens within the team that creates a different kind of dynamic in our good guys than what the movies offer. So I think that's really interesting as a difference between the two worlds that are essentially the same world, but it is two structures, it is two ways of telling what's happening. It's two different kind of ethos we're living because there's all this implied goodness in the movies and everyone's on the same page and we're all just here for our mission. And there's a lot of headbutting in the series, and learning to be part of a team is at the forefront of the storytelling where the team just kind of functions. There isn't absence of team in the movies because you do have three of them. You have Charlene and Judson and Flynn, but they just work because they each have their own distinct role and they each do their own thing, and they need to step in to their role and do their thing when they have to, but they're not stepping on each other's toes, where the show becomes about four people trying to do the same job. And you reintroduce the idea of a guardian being part of the core team rather than Charlene's not really a guardian anymore, and he doesn't have a guardian after the first movie. So there's a lot of interesting dynamics at play that are so different from the movies and changes the tone a lot of the time, I think. And obviously there's definitely also a production shift where the first season actually starts with a backdoor pilot that's a 2-episode basically movie. So it feels like the original movies when you start the show, especially if you're coming straight out of watching the movies. It feels like you're dropped into a new Librarian movie, and then shifts from that third episode on into a production style even that is more TV. It just looks different. The sets are different, and it's really interesting how they kind of ushered the watchers into this. And I guess you would suppose that anyone who's watching the show would have watched the movies, but you can't really guarantee that. So it's interesting to still do the movie style opening, do these 2 episodes that begin feeling like the movie, bigger sweeping kind of sets and storytelling, and Flynn at the front, and then moving into a much tighter, not only budgetary, but definitely budgetary space where you kind of can see like the sets are more controlled, the lighting is different, and how we move about the story becomes much more TV series rather than TV movie. So it's always interesting to watch that dynamic play out in that first season. And it's not knocking anything, because I think the show still has like the great costumes. I mean, they're so good in the show about the costumes because they're playing it very on the nose. So it's not overly clever or anything, but everyone looks exactly how you need them to look to tell you who they are. Flynn definitely has that dorky explorer professor thing happening, kind of Indiana Jones adjacent, but dorkier. And I always love his taste in suits. And clothing outside of his adventure clothing is very telling of how kind of dorky he is, but in a nice way. Like, I don't ever use that term without it being complimentary. To me, dork is a highly complimentary term. But Rebecca Romaine, who's incredibly easy to dress because, she's a model, but she's very utilitarian, but looks good. You've got Cassandra in the whimsical clothing, and they even make a joke in the 4th season where Stone never has any sleeves. And Ezekiel's very standard because he's your most modern, normal, just guy on the show. And I do love Jenkins in a 3-piece suit. Incredible costumes, great prop work on the show. The sets, again, are much smaller in the start of the production. I think it gets bigger, especially because the library comes back. I don't know if their budgets got larger as they went on, but I do feel like the production value went up as the series went through the seasons. I felt like it looked more expensive as it went on, and I don't know if they just got better at it or CGI got cheaper. The CGI definitely is very of the era and of the fact that it's a TV show on cable. It's not super impressive a lot of the time, but I'm not really bothered by stuff like that because it's not supposed to be better than that. And I think the best CGI in the show is probably when Caliber is there. So I think it all really works as a TV show. It's just a little bit different, but I still feel like it has this social contract with the audience where this is for comfort. It's kind of low stakes. And it's about goodness and these smart people solving these problems. And that is the thesis of the show. A little different than the movies. But I do think there are things that happen in season 4 that start to break the social contract. And I'm going to go through the seasons because it was really interesting to watch it as like a season by season show. Not that you don't watch every show like that, but some shows don't have as much of a marker between seasons. I feel like this one really has distinct markers because it does season arcs. I think the show on this social contract idea excels when the team is getting along and the characters are in harmony with each other. I'm not sure that I need it to do things like create discord for interest and resolution between my team of good guys. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's just me and how I'm watching it. Maybe people like that there's something to be resolved between these people. I would rather them lean more into the vibe of the movies where it was like, oh, this person needs to grow, but there's not a discord that's happening. That's not to say I don't enjoy it. I love it. I love watching this show. It is a comfort show, and it's so much fun. It's most of the time, it's always succeeding at the fun element, which is an extra thing. It's not part of how I would metric the success of the seasons, because for me, the seasons work on two levels where I'm measuring how well they're doing. One is the mythical arc and how the season arc is working, because to me, these seasons are built like a puzzle. It is like something that Flynn is solving. And there's a conclusion where all the pieces come together at the end. All the stuff that you did during the show that seemed like just a one-off kind of comes together and is in fact structurally like a puzzle that he solved. And the other side for me is, how are the characters getting along and vibing, and how much fun am I having watching this team do the work they're doing and develop as characters? So that's where I start to really look at how I would rank the seasons. So before I get into the ranking of the seasons, just to touch upon the characters introduced in this show, because the show comes in, takes away everyone Flynn has, and restarts by giving you a whole new set of people. I enjoy all three of the new librarians kind of equally. There are different times where each one excels in an episode here or there. I think for me, the show really lands with Eve and Jenkins as characters. I start to notice as you progress through the seasons, they're leaning more on Eve to carry the show. Rebecca Romijn is definitely great in this role, and she can carry more, I think. And the best stuff for me comes with her and Jenkins. Jenkins is by far my favorite thing about the series, which is why this episode is named after him. Title is after the Librarians and some dude named Jeff, which was the Jenkins episode of season 4. I love Jenkins so much. I think they've written such a brilliant character, and John Larroquette nails his vibe so hard. I actually find it amazing to watch him walk this line of being very buttoned up, very dry, very funny. He's comedic relief, but he's also the hero a lot of the time. He has all the knowledge, he has the wisdom. He is equally paternal, but also kind of one of the gang sometimes, and really steps into like the action hero role here and there. It's just so many things in one role where, especially when Flynn's not around, I feel like he's carrying the weight of a character that feels like they could come in and defeat a bad guy. I think the 3 librarians, they're adorable and they work well together and they have really interesting episodes telling their stories, but none of them ever feel like they're going to charge in like Flynn does and save the day solo in a way to me, where Jenkins definitely feels that way. And I think Eve feels that way. So maybe that's why I think they're weightier characters, is because they feel like the heroes of the moment a lot of the time. So to get into the rankings of how these seasons work for me it's 4, 3, 1, and 2, and that's worst to best. I say worst. It's a good season, but season 4 is the lowest for me because, first of all, it's low on that whole comfort team vibes thing that I was talking about. So you've got a lot of discord. You've got this Flynn versus the library versus Jenkins vibe that I do not actually enjoy that. I just have to put that aside when I'm watching that season because I don't like this idea that we've positioned Flynn and Jenkins against each other. That's absurd, and not in like a complimentary way. And it's just so hard to watch Flynn get that quickly manipulated. I do think I wouldn't call it unearned, but I think when you take the Nicole character and you tell me it with words, yes, I understand. She means a lot to him. He felt like he caused her death, and then no one ever told him that she didn't die. And that's a lot of betrayals on top of each other, and that would hurt him enough to put doubt in his mind. And at the same time, when I'm just being told that, and being told that by a character that I love as much as Jenkins, for Flynn to not hear Jenkins out is a little bit hard as a viewer. Maybe it's just me, but I don't vibe with this whole feeling that he would take sides against Jenkins, even all of this hurting as much as it does. I don't know. It just doesn't feel right to me. And that's why it's a harder season for me, but also because the arc and this whole idea I'm talking about with things being like a puzzle. It's the only season that doesn't really function as much like a puzzle. Things do come together in the end, but not in the way the other seasons do. So it's not really this thing that gets solved the same way as the other seasons. And halfway through, it's kind of just left aside for one-off episodes. I do think this season is particularly strong with the one-off episodes. I will say that. It has some of my favorite episodes of the whole series. Some dude named Jeff. That's why I named it after this. I love this Jenkins story, the D&D. I think there's that incredible training montage that I would pit against any other unlikely army montage training sequence that like I have seen in anything else. It's so funny. I really like the episode Hidden Sanctuary, which is the Cassandra episode where she runs away to that town that's super safe, only to find the Fae. And I love Silver Screen. Silver Screen is when Eve and Flynn get trapped in that noir movie. I think it might be my favorite episode of the whole show. It's hard to say that, but I think I'm just going to say it and live with that. It's funny because that one is actually written by Noah Wiley, and I just am a sucker for any being pulled into a movie trope, and I'm a sucker for jokes about movies and noirs. I love noir film so much that I love playing with all the tropes in those movies and all this genre talk. And I also like that it was a bunch of genre movies. It just made me think back to my film studies genre class where we basically watched westerns and sci-fis and noirs, and it was a whole episode about noirs and sci-fi and westerns. So I enjoyed it so much, and I think that's telling of season 4 for me as a viewer, is that I'm enjoying these one-off episodes that are kind of apart from this main storyline so much more than I'm enjoying the arc of the season. So I think that's where I fall into this. This is the lowest ranked. It's also, I know that people are frustrated with the ending of the show, the ending of this season. To rewind time and have all of the things undone does make you feel like you lost a whole season that you watched. I would have done things differently by letting all the characters retain their memories of what happened. Because then at the very least, they wouldn't have lost what they learned about themselves. It really sucks to love an episode like Some Dude Named Jeff and to love an episode like Hidden Sanctuary and then know that those things never happened to those characters. But not only did they not happen, they can't remember the version of reality where they did happen. Where Eve and Flynn at the end do get to retain their memories. So it's really confusing as to why the others can't retain theirs. There's no real logic there, except for like getting a couple jokes in at the end, which I don't think is worth making the audience feel that way. And it makes me genuinely sad that Jenkins would lose the only friends he has outside of the library due to all this, because I do ponder, like, okay, so they tether at the end, they're changing the future, they're not going to fight Nicole. What things that happened in season 4, when you rewind time, would still happen? Cassandra, does she leave at any point? Because the Ecuador mission would have to happen and go badly for her to then want to run away to a safe place. If that doesn't happen, does the clippings book send them to this place? Because that town still needs to be rectified from the fact that it's under the spell of a fae. So it really intrigues me to think as a viewer, like, okay, we're back at the beginning of season 4, at the end of season 4. Does Jeff find that book? Does Jeff trade places with Jenkins? Does the Jenkins story still happen? I hope so, because I want him to go through that. But also, him not being mortal, I don't know what that does to this story. So that's where my brain went, is what would still happen that happened and what wouldn't happen. So I think they should have at least retained their memories, because then they would know the things that had happened in their other version of reality. But what can I say? This is why season 4 didn't work as well as the others. Bless, because I do think, like I said, the production value got higher. I think they got tighter as a unit of making the show. So as much as the arc doesn't work and like they chose this story and they're making everyone fight, I still think a lot of the episodes are very good. The next one is season 3 for me. Again, I think people put this one at the top. I think it's a very good season. I just think, for me, again, I'm working on this level of the team dynamic is declining at this point. Over the 4 seasons, this is where we start to hit a lot of having this intervention because Flynn is pissing everybody off. And then we've got the arc of the season. I really want to love it the most because I'm obsessed with Egypt. I love Egyptian lore and mythology. I am so here for any mummy vibes, but I just don't think it's as strong for me as other seasons. And the best part of the whole season for me becomes Charlene being back. I love getting to see her even for a little bit. I love having her on an actual adventure and be kind of a badass and not just at the library yelling about receipts. So I think it's good. I just think it has more likable moments than episodes for me, where in season 4, you've got all these one-off episodes that I love. In season 3, you've got moments that I love and not as many episodes that I'm like, I love that whole episode. To me, the best moment of the whole season is Jenkins fighting off the vampires, which is the Eternal Question episode. And I really enjoyed Apple of Discord because it was just a lot of comedy with the Jenkins and Ezekiel trying to deal with the dragons, and the entire meeting. There's a lot of comedy in this episode that I love. The next one is season 1 because it's obviously a strong start for me with the backdoor pilot and basically a whole movie to start the thing off. I think it suffers a little bit because for me, you've got Flynn in it the least, which I understand they wanted to give space to the team, but the team's still building, so there's not a lot of camaraderie. You've got kind of like a little bit of a lower score for me on this whole, the team is great and they're fun to watch together. It's like the team argues and they don't necessarily trust each other, which is fair because it's finding its footing as a show. They're finding their footing as a team, but it ranks really high because I think it has the best arc of the whole show. The Arthurian tale, the Galahad reveal, just seeing Jerry O'Connell show up as Lancelot is so huge. I actually learned today very much like 15 minutes before recording this that he is married to Rebecca Romaine. I do not know celebrity stuff. I don't track who's married to whom. So it was really funny to me to be like, oh, these two people were married and are still married all this time later. So I didn't even realize that he was tied to the production because of her. And now I understand why someone on Threads was like, I bet they didn't have a hard time getting him on the show. Yeah, no, it would be easy. It was such a good reveal. I loved getting to see Jenkins have his hero moment, and the puzzle of it all worked so well, and having all the things come together, the thread from the maze and all these objects that they had to get together, and the traveling through the alternate realities and seeing each librarian in their own kind of reality where they are the sole librarian was really cool. So I just thought it worked as a season of TV really well. It was really cohesive in that way that it all tied together at the end. So even though I was feeling a little bit like, oh, I wish there were more Flynn, it actually just worked really well when he came back and it all came together as a puzzle, and it gave a good reason for him being gone. Of course, we also get the library back at the end, so it's interesting because season 1 does this thing of shrinking down the production by cutting them off from the library. So you get this really tight space of the annex, and you start to live in that and have a really much tighter restriction on what can be done by these characters. So it was really interesting to watch that kind of play out over a season and then see them commit to something new. They didn't stick with it. They did that thing that if anyone's listened to my other episodes, I really love when shows don't just seal themselves into their premise. They're like, okay, we did that for a season. Now let's do the next thing. Let's progress to the next step of the story instead of being too scared to leave something that they know how to manage and work and figure out. Because I do think shows trap themselves that way a lot of the time. So for me, the strongest episodes end up being the 2-parter backdoor pilot, which is the Crown of King Arthur and the Sword in the Stone. I love Rule of 3 because I love Morgana, and I love seeing the reveal of Morgan Le Fay, and I really do just enjoy the cute little science fair setting of the whole story. And of course, the Loom of Fate, because that's the finale that I was talking about. I will say this season did break my heart because killing Cal was just brutal. I mean, getting rid of Charlene and Judson, like at least they did it in a nice way. Killing Cal was crazy. And I did hear after, when I was prepping this, that they didn't realize people would be so upset, which I think is crazy. I don't know how they think people wouldn't be upset that they killed Cal. But that the audience was so upset that it reframed the entire season 2 arc to make sure that Cal could come back. And that's bringing us why season 2 for me is the best season. I think it's really high on the scale of like, this team is cohesive and it feels good to watch them work together. And Flynn is back a lot more than season 1, but in a balanced way, because this show does try to have its cake and eat it too. You know, it tries to be, oh, we're doing ensemble and we're not doing just Flynn's story, but then Flynn comes back and then we're doing Flynn. So it's just trying to do 2 things all the time, with ensemble versus Flynn being at the center. And there are times when that works better than others. I think it works the best in this season because we're getting along. And it also has a very good puzzle arc. I don't think it's as strong as season 1 because maybe I don't think that the Moriarty Prospero characters are as strong as a Duloc or Lancelot reveal feels really huge, but I think they're good, they're solid, and I think the puzzle of the season works for me. And it works for me especially because this season just has so much payoff. You get Cal back at the end, which is huge. You also get this thing where Flynn is the Arthurian legend, because Arthur's legend is based on the prophecy that he will wield Excalibur again. So everyone's waiting for Arthur to be resurrected, and it's actually Flynn. I love that so much. I think that's what I used to love about Hercules and Xena, where I used to take these things that were historical or mythical things and used to shove the character into it. It's like, oh, she's that person or he's that person. So I really love that they made Flynn, the Arthurian legend, come to life. I think the resolution is great with the time travel. This is when they did time travel the best, and I do love a lot of time travel jokes. And it has such great episodes as well. Like there's just one-offs that are really working for me, like Hollow Men. I mean, you get the library back, but then you get Hollow Men, which is the library as a person. This is super Doctor Who coded because they did an episode where the TARDIS was a woman. And it's so nice to see Flynn get to connect with the library as a human and get to talk about Judson and Charlene and how he misses them with an entity that knows them as well as he does. And I really loved Point of Salvation. I thought that one was such a strong episode. That's when Ezekiel is trapped in the video game loop, and I love the reveal of it's not a time loop, it's a video game. I do love gaming, so I think it just worked well for me as a reveal that it wasn't just a time loop like other shows have done time loops. It's a video game reset. I really enjoyed that one because also I found that character kind of the least emotionally connecting character for me until that episode. And I thought they did such a good job of making him finally emotionally relatable because he's always kind of disconnected. And I really loved Happily Ever Afters. I loved seeing this kind of they're in their ideal version of what their lives would be like. And when Flynn stumbles onto them in this alternate reality that they're in, it's kind of like this terrible cable FBI show of a local town where Eve is kind of like the sheriff and Ezekiel is FBI. And it's just funny to me that it kind of feels like they're in a TV show together. And the final curtain, which is the finale with all the time travel, I just think it works really well as a season and as character work more than maybe a season 3 for me. But I think, season 3, 1, and 2 are pretty close calls. 4 stands apart because I think when you make that finale decision, you're doing a lot. And you're asking people to accept something really big. And like I said, for me personally, I don't want to see Flynn arguing with Jenkins. It's not fun. I do not enjoy. And I think the relief I get in season 4 is when at least they reveal in the finale that Flynn didn't leave. He got kidnapped. But they let you believe that for a good 6 episodes. And that doesn't feel great either. So I will say that the other 3 seasons excel further. But again, my favorite episodes, I think, are in season 4. So it's always fascinating to me when breaking down shows like this because the whole show is great. The whole show is fun. But this one has very distinct seasons and arcs happening. So if I had to just go watch a couple of episodes, I would probably watch season 4 episodes because I love these episodes so much. But that's not the season I enjoy the most. So there's a lot to love about this show. There's a lot to get out of it, especially the comfort and the knowing that the good guys are going to win. And, that's why the social contract that I said this show has with this audience, when you break that, when you kill Jenkins, that's harsh. It is not fair to do that in a show like this. It's asking a lot. And I wonder if you're on your first watch, if you think he's going to come back, because it does feel very final that happens. It feels very real. So uncool of them to do that to anybody. I don't know what it's like to see it for the first time because it's been too long. And also I would have binge watched it. So I wouldn't have lived with that illusion for more than an hour. So it wouldn't have been that painful. So except for wiping away everything that happened in season 4, excellent show, very few notes. For the most part, it's just fun to watch and everyone does such a good job. So it is immensely rewatchable. I will end it here by saying that I think I'm about to go watch Widow's Bay. I do not love to do a podcast on a cold first watch, so I might try to watch one season of Widow's Bay twice and do an episode on that. If not, weirdly, expect me to just watch the movie Speed. Because, not to put a timestamp on this, but this week is my birthday. And the Speed anniversary, I don't know how many years. Oof, I don't want to admit how many years. I think Speed's 30th anniversary was about a week ago. And I love that movie. It's my favorite action movie of all time. So because it's my birthday and because it's Speed's birthday, I was thinking of doing that as well. So who knows when this recording stops, which one I will do. But one of those is going to happen next week. And if you made it all the way here, thank you for listening and stay cool.